Well, decorative grade basically is not acid-free, and it's stuff that you're going to hang on the wall and look pretty for the next 10 or 15 years, and then you're going to redecorate, okay? See, this is the easiest way to remember it. Conservation grade is using materials that you can pass your piece down to your kids and your grandkids, okay? And museum grade, you should be able to pass that down to your grandkids' kids. You know, it should last a lot longer. So when it comes to, but of course, pricing-wise, decorative grade is going to be cheapest. Museum grade is going to be the most expensive. So as artists, you know, a lot of times we compromise and we want to use the cheapest things possible on our framing. You know, and that's not always the best thing for your artwork. But as part of the business of art, sometimes you have to do that to be able to stay in the art business. So if you're doing prints and you're framing prints, decorative grade is fine because you can replace that. But if you're doing an original piece, you don't want to damage your artwork by putting it in something that's going to damage it over time. You know, the acidic level and matting and backing board will eventually degrade your artwork. So, you know, it depends on how important your artwork is to you. You know, if you're going to frame it in decorative grade materials, you might want to let your customer know when they buy it that they might want to reframe it. You know, so that it lasts longer. This is a sample of different mat boards. They were all cut at the same time. The top one is decorative grade. The blue one is conservation grade. And then there's a black core and a blue core, just to show you some differences with the bubbles. These were cut about 1.5 years ago. Okay, and when I cut them, these first two were the same color. They were both white on the core, so you can see the difference on how much it has turned in just 1.5 years. Okay. Yeah. When you go to a frame shop and they say it's pH neutralized, that just means that currently, right now, it's at a pH of 7, but that it's like that acid will eventually come back. pH neutralized does not mean acid-free. Okay. It just means that they've neutralized it temporarily to a buffer of 7, and eventually it's going to get acidic again. It's kind of comparable to taking an antacid for heartburn, okay? You get rid of the heartburn for a little while, but it comes back. So it's the same thing with pH neutralized. So if you're wanting mats that are acid-free, make sure they say acid-free, not just pH neutralized, okay? The conservation grade, you know, it's not really all that much more to get the acid-free select grade and the crescents, so it's like a few dollars more, and it protects your artwork for a lot longer. Museum grade is both acid-free and lignin-free, so it's made of cotton, not wood, so it's a little bit better for your artwork, but it's pretty minimal, the difference between nowadays, because with the improvements that they made in the paper pulping, between the regular acid-free and the lignin-free. And all of this is on page 1 of your framing material comparisons. So, and just like with mat board, there's different types of mounting boards, so things that you actually mount your artwork to, the backboard. If you're using like cardboard or anything like that, probably not acid-free. I can tell you it's not acid-free. If you ever do anything that has print on it that you can see through, put it on something black so that it absorbs the colors so that you don't have the backside showing through to the front. And then there's a thing called perfect mount, which if you're into photography at all, perfect mount is good for mounting your photographs, but again, this is pH neutralized acid-free. It's not technically considered conservation. And then frame molding options at the bottom of that page. You know, there's different types of frames you can use. There's your cheapest option is probably going to be plastics. You'll see a core in it that has kind of a puffiness. It's going to be really lightweight. This is the same frame style in a wood, and you can tell on the sides that it's, you know, a lot heavier duty. A plastic frame will bend, a wood frame won't, but these are going to cost you about 1/3 of what a wood frame will. So, and then of course there's metals, which are pretty sturdy too, except if you get them wet, they rust. So I'll pass these around for you guys too if you want to see them. When you're talking about glass and acrylic, there's different grades of glass and acrylic, just like there are different grades of matting and backing and framing. The most important thing with glass and acrylic is if you're wanting to do a conservation grade, that you get it to be UV protective, okay? There's different properties to both glass and acrylic. There's the translucency of the, keeps kicking in and out. There's the translucency of the glass and the acrylic, and then there is the UV properties of it. So if you're concerned about how bright your picture is going to look, then you want to look at the translucency qualities of the glass or the acrylic. That's how much light passes through the glass and then back out. Okay? Does everybody understand what that means? When you're looking at things like non-glare coatings, they have a pretty low translucency. I think it's around 88, 89 translucency. Whereas when you get to something like museum glass, then you're more at a 99% translucency. That's why when you look at this straight on, you know, the matte finish doesn't, or the non-glare doesn't reflect the light, but it also doesn't reflect the brightness of the piece behind it. And then when you turn it to the side, do you see what happens? Everybody see that? How foggy it gets and hazy? That's because of the coating. It's a coated finish. Whereas with museum glass, it's baked so pure that there is no coating on it, and that's why you get the non-glare attribute without actually putting a coating over it. Because it almost looks like there's nothing here, right? In the center, but there is. It's just so pure that there's no, the iron has been baked completely out of it. The regular clear glass or conservation clear has the UV properties of museum glass and the conservation non-glare, but you get that reflection. So, I mean, most people are used to looking at reflections through when they're viewing artwork, but if it's a priceless piece of art, you might want to go with museum glass, you know, or if it's something that you're going to be in a place where you know you get a high amount of glare, museum glass works, but it's ridiculously expensive. So if you're trying to save cost but still do something that's conservation grade, I would go with conservation clear or UV filtering acrylic. These are conservation glasses. I didn't bring the non-conservation glasses. When you look at glass, the non-conservation glass has a green tinge to it. I don't know if you guys have ever noticed that. Have you noticed that before? Yes, no. Regular glass has a green tint to it because it has such a high iron content in it. And conservation glass has a yellow tinge to it because of the UV filter in it. Okay, it's just the properties of the glass. Now, the clear glass has a higher light transmission, so you get a brighter image. But if you have a yellow tint or a green tint, you're changing the color of your artwork, you're changing the color of your matting when it's behind yellow or green glass. It's very slight, but it is noticeable. When you buy if you buy a frame that has glass in it, take your glass out, take it off your artwork, then put it on your artwork, and notice the difference in the color. There will be probably a slight green tint to it. But with acrylic, since it's not made, it's not made from the same materials as glass is, it's naturally optically pure. So your color, you don't get that green tint, you don't get that yellow tint. So, I mean, that's one of the pluses of acrylic, is that the optical clarity of it. However, if you're doing the non-glare, again, when you get off to the side, you see it? How it distorts. You know, it looks great from the front, but not so great from the side. And the farther you get anything out that's coated, the more it distorts, the less the light translucency comes back and forth. So, there's pluses and minuses to both glass and acrylic. For artists, you might want to really consider going with acrylic, because if you do any shows where you have to ship work, or if you want to hang in, there's quite a few museums and galleries that will not accept things with glass in them for liability reasons. You know, because glass, you hit it hard enough, it shatters and explodes. Acrylic, you hit it hard enough, it might crack, but it doesn't do nearly as much damage as glass does to the artwork and the things that are surrounding it. However, glass is super easy to clean, really hard to scratch. Okay, you can use regular everyday cleaners on glass. But when you get to acrylics, if you don't use the right cleaners and the right towels, you're going to scratch it, and then you have to replace it or fill it, one of the two. A lot of artists don't like that because it scratches so easy, you know, but if you know how to care for your acrylic and you take care with your artwork and you don't sling it around every time you go to a show, or if the gallery that you're at doesn't sling it around or wherever you're hanging, because I know that's a problem for a lot of people, your acrylic should last just as nicely as glass does. You just want to make sure you use the right cleaners and the right cloths to clean it with. No alcohol, no ammonia when you're cleaning acrylic. Okay, so the scratch is right there. I'm going to buff this in. Now, if you get too deep of a scratch, there's nothing that you can really do to, you know, to fix it. But if it's a fairly light scratch, you should be able to buff it out.
Will it work on my glasses?
To some extent, I have used them on my glasses before. And actually,
I'm always scratching my glasses.
Novus One or spray way is actually really good to clean your glasses with. Acrylic cleaners are actually pretty good usually for electronics. I think I made that scratch just a little too dark sweet.
On the glass with the green tint,
Mm-hmm.
that is so slight, I can't imagine many people seeing that as a problem.
Well, you know, people are so used to seeing it that it's not a problem. But if your piece is already green to start with, and you add more green to it, or you really want a bright white mat on it, and you have put a piece of green glass on it, it changes the mood of your piece. If you're wanting to cut your own acrylic, you know, if you score it, and snap it, and it's pretty easy. It's a lot safer than cutting glass.
Was that a plexiglass cutter?
No, this is just a razor blade.
That's a what?
Just a razor blade, a jiffy razor blade.
Just a razor blade can do it?
Oh yeah. If you have a straight edge and a razor blade, you can cut your own acrylic.
Cut that again.
Want me to cut it again?
What's your cut tip?
I'm cutting my fresh cut piece here. But yeah, this is just a regular razor blade. Score it a couple times. Snap. I mean, it's really a lot easier to cut acrylic than it is to cut glass. With glass, you really should get out your glass handling gloves and, you know, a glass roller blade and,
I missed what you used. What did you use?
I just used a regular razor blade right now, but they do make really acrylic cutters. They're diamond head usually.
A razor blade and one score?
I scored that 3 times. Depends on how thick your acrylic is. If you have like an 1/8 inch acrylic, you're going to want to score it a lot deeper, you know, than that. But
Because that's what I usually end up with.
yeah, if you have a thicker piece of acrylic than this, you're going to score it quite a few more times. But once you get it scored, just snap it.
But you don't need thick acrylic on most paintings.
The bigger the painting, probably the thinner the acrylic you want to go with, just for weight, you know, more than anything. If you have something that's 40 by 60 or bigger, you really want something that's thin to keep the weight down. Acrylic is 1/3 of the weight of glass. To use glass is if you do pastel work or charcoal work. Pastels and charcoals don't necessarily embed into the paper, they set on top of paper. So that's why a lot of pastelists use sandpaper, because it has a higher grit to it. Because it's pure pigment, it doesn't embed in, it sets on top of the paper. So that also means that it flakes. So when you peel the coating on a piece of acrylic, you get a big static discharge. So that's not good for pastels and for charcoals. So print copies, you know, there's no real special requirements. You can go with decorative grade. Photography, you really want airspace between your photo and your glass or your acrylic, because photography can stick to the glass. If you've ever seen photography that looks wet underneath glass or acrylic, it's because there's no airspace and it's sticking. You know, a gloss coat will look wet underneath when it's really not. So you want to use, if you're doing photography, you want spacers, or you want enough mats around it to keep it from sticking to the glass or the acrylic. And it's just a good idea all the way around for any kind of original artwork to put spacers or mats around it just to give it that airspace between the glass and the acrylic and the mount board. Watercolors, pen and inks, they really should be hinge mounted, and I'll show you what a hinge mount is here in a few minutes. And like I said, charcoals and pastels, glass is recommended, and spacers to keep them from touching the glass or the acrylic. Although I have seen some people do, and I don't recommend this, but I have seen people who frame pastels and charcoals where they smack it right up against the glass and then seal it with tape. Now, they say it's great because it doesn't flake, and because there's no airspace for it to flake. If somebody shatters that glass or their acrylic, you're toast. Your piece is ruined. So I know people who swear by it. Some of the old masters did that, so they feel like they should do that too. But it's dangerous for your artwork to do that. So I'd rather clean a little bit of dust off the glass every once in a while than take the chance of having the artwork damaged like that. So that, or if it ever sticks to it and you pull off the glass, there goes your piece. So, acrylics and oils, you really should varnish them before they're framed, or take them out of their frames and varnish them about 6 months afterwards. With acrylics, you can do it pretty much right away. Have you ever gotten a smudge or a mark on your mat?
Yeah,
Do you know how to get it off?
I have a little bag that,
A knead eraser will take off most marks. If it's like a pencil mark or something like that, just any kind of kneaded eraser will take that off. You can also use a product called Unseal sometimes to take, but if it's too embedded in, if it's too deep, like a pen mark that has really sank in, you're never going to get that off. Sometimes you can use a razor blade if it's just a dot to get like one of those little black dots that's embedded in your mat. Have you ever seen that? You buy a new mat board, it's got a little black speck in it. That's usually, it's a impurity in the mat board. If it's not deep, it's not too deep, you can sometimes take a razor, the tip of a razor blade, pick it out, and then use an eraser to smooth out the edges. Or a nail file will help you smooth out the edges too sometimes. You just can't go too rough on it, you gotta be very gentle. If your beveled edge is fraying, you can use a nail file, just an everyday nail file, just to smooth that down. They'll save you an awful lot of money in mats. A nail file and an eraser. So this is by Ken Ferris. I got it from the gallery. It says Arches print. Let's feel it out of the sleeve here. Okay, so I have a print, I have a mat, and I have some artist tape, which is pH neutralized. Anything that contains glue is not ever really acid-free. They'll call it acid-free, but really if you look on the label, it's pH neutralized. Because glue in and of itself is not, it has acid in it. There's no way around that. You can neutralize it, but it's always going to have acidity to it. Now you can get hinging tapes that are acid-free that don't have glue. They're gummy. You wet it, it's like a wheat paste type of thing. And that is technically archival to do something like that. But this is not an archival piece, we're just going to. There's two ways you can do this. The easy, fast way I'm going to show you right now is you just take and you put a little piece of tape at the top of your print. If you're doing a lot of these for a show, then take your mat and lay it over the top of it where you want it and press down. And then voila, you're done with yours, and you can slide it in the sleeve or put it in the frame. We're going to do what's called a T-hinge on it. I'm going to kind of line it up where I want it. And then I'll place it on my board here. And then I'm going to gently pick up the mat. And then I'm going to make a T-hinge, okay? Which, when it's done, it's basically going to look like, a little T. You're basically taking the tape and sticking opposite ends together, okay? So up towards me, okay? It's not stuck to the mat board. It's stuck to the back of the print. And I'm gonna take a couple more pieces and I'm gonna make a little cross on it. And then your hinge to the back. Okay, so it's hanging there, okay?
And you
Now-
only have to do that at the top.
You only want to do it at the top. If you hinge around the side, if you tape all the way around your print, basically what gravity is gonna do is gravity says, I wanna pull down, okay? So if there's anything stuck on the bottom or the sides, it has nowhere to go. So if it's just hinged at the top, gravity will do its business. It'll keep it hanging straight down. But if you tack all the way around here, you're gonna start to wave and bubble. And it will exacerbate problems that you already had. So especially with wavy watercolors, the more you tack around it, the more it's gonna eventually wave. So you wanna try to get your watercolors as flat as possible before you even get to the mounting process. You know, if you can press them in some way, or better yet, when you're painting, make sure you're stretched, you know, so it doesn't wave as you're painting. But yeah, technically only at the top. You know, we try to make things way more complicated than they really need to be. You know, so and then for archival matting, technically, if I was doing that with rice hinges that were that had the wheat paste and were actually acid-free, not taped, then you do the same thing with your hinge for your mat. Only you make it a little stick together. So one side's sticky, this side's sticky together, and sticky side on the foam core. And again, you would just hinge your mat at the top.
Did you mark off where you were gonna lay your photograph?
I'm sorry? Did I mark it off? No, I laid it down and gently picked my mat back up. You can mark it off, you can get real complicated with a lot of
You were just
stuff.
doing it by eye, right? But a lot of people can't do that.
Well, you just have to be gentle. I mean, when you lay it down, you can put a little sandbag weight on top of it so it doesn't move, and then pull back up. So long as you keep, so long as you don't disturb the placement. But I mean, you can mark it off, you know, if you want to go that extra step. But if you want to hinge your mat using like the rice papers and things like that, this obviously isn't rice paper, but to give you the idea, you know, your mat's just hanging top-wise. Okay. If you're not doing acid-free, you know, you can just use ATG tape. This is just double-sided tape that's in here. When it rolls out, it's two-sided tape. Okay. And they make these wonderful little guns for us framers. And if you do a lot of this stuff, you know, and then you're done. Okay. They
You're
make.
saying you shouldn't use that?
If you're doing true museum quality framing, you technically should hinge your mats on. But most of us are not using museum quality anything in our framing to start with. So, you know, the minimal amount of double-sided tape that you have in there is not going to do nearly as much damage as having a decorative grade mat board and decorative grade backing board. You know, especially if you put your tape around the edges, not close to the artwork. It takes a while for it to seep anyway, so. But truly, for museum quality, it's as little glues and tapes as humanly possible. Just because, but if you're conservation grade or decorative grade, you know, the ATG tape's fine. They do make a pH neutralized ATG tape. It doesn't stick as well. Something to keep in mind, you want to have as clean of a surface area as possible before you start working with acrylic in the first place. If you have a lot of dust in the house, dust before you do anything, clean everything so that you're in a clean environment. But even in a clean environment, you're still going to get dust. It's just the nature of the beast, okay? You can spray yourself down with static art. That helps. Spray your surroundings with static art. That helps keep the static down. Something else you can do Most acrylic cleaners have an anti-static element in them, so it helps keep down the static. So if you spray the outside of your film, I mean, obviously I'm not cleaning this because I'm going to hang it like this, but I'm spraying this on here just to cut down some of the static, okay?
You know, the Swifters,
Swifters help too.
Swifters is one thing I use to try to pick it up.
Yeah, you can use those too. But the other thing is if you, when you lay your acrylic, you don't want to pull the sheet off and then go, hey, I have acrylic. Because then you're saying, come to be dust, and all the dust gets on here. So you want to do it in as fast and fluid of a motion as possible. So I'll usually start one end, lay it down, and pull. Because basically, I'm sucking all the dust out when I pull it. Okay? So hopefully when I pull off the top layer, I'll have a minimal amount of dust. Okay? So I'm looking through here, and so far so good. Doesn't look like there's anything in there. Just make sure.
What are you squirting on that?
This is a plastic cleaner made specifically.
848 plastic.
Yeah, it's made by Sprayway. Novus makes Novus and Brillianize are also a couple other good cleaners. And then these are framing grade cleaning cloths that we order from a framing supplier. But blue shop towels that you can get at the auto store work really good for cleaning acrylic too. Or a soft cotton cloth. Next step would be adding a frame. And before we get to, I probably should go ahead and do it. I just lay it on top and then find a nice soft surface so that you don't scratch your frames up. And then if you have a point gun, you just point it in. And this basically just shoots out little points. This is a ready-made frame. Obviously, you'll have the adjustments already on there, but then voila, done. Now, paper bagging. I know you all probably struggle with this. When you're selling something to a customer, you want it to look finished when at all possible. So you don't have to use a gun. You can just take double-sided tape and string it out. It just takes longer. But if you have a gun, you run the ATP tape along the back. So I'm just going to take my edge and cover the edges here. Push down. I didn't get a very smooth edge there. That's the way it goes. And these things are made, they're called little paperback trimmers. If you haven't seen one of these, it's one of the best invention ever made for paperbacking your work. It's a little thing that when you run it along the edge of the frame, there's a blade here and your edge is here. So you can just bend the edge of your paper over the edge of your frame. And you have a nice smooth back. So then I just go around and I do that 3 more times. And paperback. The back of your frame looks as nice as the front of your frame. With plastic frames, something to keep in mind, especially the bigger the plastic frame, the more you don't really want to hang it permanently on a wire because it will bow. Anything that is longer than it is tall, gravity is trying to pull it in and down. And that's what causes your frames to bow out from the wall. Have you ever seen a frame bow away from the wall? It's because it's hanging on a wire on one pressure point for a long period of time. And it's hard to get away from as artists because everybody wants to hang it on a wire because it goes up easy and fast, okay? And that's what we want to do as artists when we're hanging a show. We got 30 pieces of artwork to hang. Easy and fast is on a wire, and all the galleries require things to be on a wire. But if you have big pieces and you hang it on one hook, you're just saying, please, Bo, because it's going to. So the longer you have it hanging like that, the more it's going to go. And there's nothing you can do about it except request that the gallery or whoever is hanging it hangs it on 2 hooks. Okay? And some of them will, some of them won't. But for your customer, when you sell it to them, make sure that they know not to hang it on this wire, but hang it on the 2 hooks. It takes a minute or 2 longer to hang, but it's a lifetime of not having a straighten, and your frame will last a lot longer. And of course, I didn't bring a tape measure, but you want to put it down about, so that your hooks are at about 1/3 of the length of the frame, the top part of the hook, okay? Now, they make 2-hole hangers that you use 2 screws. They make 1-hole hangers. They make all kinds of things. You can screw in the screw eyes. I hate those because they take forever. Because you got to pre-drill and everything like that. But then there's the 1-hole ones. These turn so much. I like the stability of the 2-hole ones, so I almost always use 2-hole hangers. Now, obviously, I wouldn't want to measure them down so they were about the same length. If you haven't heard of plastic-coated picture framing wire, hear about it now. Second best invention next to paperback trimmer. So much easier on your hands. You don't get torn up and frayed, and it doesn't kill you every time you touch it and got to carry it around. So, for a secure knot, we're going to do a little slip knot. You're going to thread it underneath. And then you're going to go under and around the wire and back up. And then back through the hook and pull tight. Okay? And that's secure. That's not going anywhere. You know, I see people that they just wind it. And then I also see frames that fall off the wall because they're just wound, and I'm constantly rewiring people's work. So I'm going to go into the hook. I'm going to go around, under and around the wire, back up, and then back through the wire, and pull it back. It's a little easy slip knot. You don't have to stand there and actually tie it and yank on it and pull it, okay? So then we have these leftover edges. What's a nice look, you know that little coil look? You ever see that? That's basically, you pull it under and back, and under and back, and under and back, and under and back. And you start making this nice little coil. But under and over, pull back, and you're just making a little coil. It just looks a lot more finished, because as an artist, you want to give a professional appearance. I mean, you don't want to give them something that looks like, you know, your 5th grader did it. But then voila, for an added little touch, you know, you can add little bumpets on the bottoms, which I forgot to bring with me. And ATG tape your business card on the back with the title of the piece, you know, so that people know that it came from you, and it has your contact information, and the title and date, and, you know, if you want to date the piece when you sell it. Or write a little inscription to your buyer. You know, if you know who's buying it, you can say, you know, for Tom, or, you know, thanks for being a great patron, and then your name, you know, so they have something a little personalized. But that's easy schmeezy, right? Okay, so these are bottom layer mats, and these are top layer mats. So we're going to pick out some things that are going to go on our pieces. And if you pull one from each stack, they should match up. But if you pull 2 from the same, it's not going to. Okay. So I want you to pick, each of you to pick a bottom layer and a top layer mat on what you think is going to look best with your artwork. Okay, those are the bottoms. And then these are the tops. So get in there and do it fast. We only got 20 minutes left. I'm not saying one is wrong or one is right. I just want to show you the effect that it has. Okay. Lighter colors make things look bigger, right? They make it look bigger than it did before. And then darker colors on top pull your attention towards the inside of the piece. But it also makes it look a little smaller. It's just an optical illusion. You guys see
Yeah,
that?
I like that one better.
Okay. And it's preference on which you like better. So as an artist, if you want to pull more focus to the piece, and you don't mind if it looks a little smaller, a darker might be better for you. But if you want the piece to look a little bit bigger or brighter, a lighter matte will make it look brighter, okay? A darker matte on the inside of a lighter matte also helps pull your eye back in and gives you the effect of being something darker.
Focused in North St. Louis County, Northside Art Association is a nonprofit 501c3 arts organization that serves local artists through community exposure, networking, education, and peer interaction. Learn more about Northside Art Association at www.northsideartassociation.org.